Right. So you just heard Professor Stephen Adai, and earlier you heard Mr. Kwesi Amoakwanta, who was the Minister for Roads. He had lodged a complaint to EOCO, and he lodged the complaint, I think that was on the 20th of October 2023, and asked the office to investigate this particular comment by Professor Stephen Adai. The EOCO has finished its investigations in a report dated the 19th of March 2024, on the back of which report the Ministry of Roads has issued a statement accepting same and expressing joy over it. So they say that they had contacted a number of people, Professor Stephen Adai, the Ministry of Roads and Highways Scheduled Officer, Director Programs, Ministry of Roads and Highways, Dr. Joseph J. Mensah, Director Feeder Roads, and Mr. Samuel Akwoku, representative of the Chief Director. They also contacted these contractors, Oswell Investment Limited, Usuya Ghana Limited, Fair Sky Limited, and Maripoma Enterprise Limited. They spoke to these, and they come to the conclusion that the office completed its investigations from the totality of the available information to the office. Professor Stephen Adai's comments were found to be unfortunate and general within the context of perceived corruption in the country. It was quite apparent that his comments were oversimplification of the tender procedure of the Ministry of Roads and Highways and highly presumptuous about the perceived corruption in the country generally. This was particularly so as Professor Stephen Adai situated his comments on the UNODC, that's the UN Office of Drugs Commission 2022 report on corruption in Ghana. According to Professor Stephen Adai, the report indicated that in 67% of bribery cases, officials demand for it. For Professor Adai, it was against this background that a friend casually mentioned that he, that's the friend, heard that if one wants contract at the ministries, that person has to pay bribes. Besides that, he has to he had no distinct evidence of anybody taking bribes at the ministry, and that the use of the Roads and Highway Ministry was for only illustrative purposes, and that it could be any ministry. When Professor Stephen Adai was asked to mention the name of the said friend, he refused to mention the name. Conclusion: following from the above, the matter is disposed of as unsubstantiated and highly presumptuous. Regards, M.Y.T. Adodankwa Mrs., Commissioner of Police, Executive Director of the EOCO. Mr. Vitus Azim, a foremost anti-corruption crusader in the country, joins us on this topic as well. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Azim.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Great. What's your analysis and what's your comment on the back of the report by EOCO?
Well, the report or the findings do not agree with the general perception of the situation in the country. Maybe they investigated specific contracts where they can say that those specific contracts did not involve the payment of bribes. But in general, and when we are talking to individual contractors, even when you are talking to some government officials, there is an admission that money is changing hands. And the general information out there is that it's either 10% or 50% upfront. And sometimes you have to pay, let's say upfront, you pay before you even get the contract awarded. There was a situation where a foreign firm came and wanted to invest in some area. and they went to a particular minister, and the minister demanded 10% of the amount involved in an investment, not a contract you are going to award, but in an investment you want to bring to this country. I used to work with the former Internal Revenue Service. I went around the district in one region to enforce the payment of the 5% tolling tax. And one accountant told me that the district secretary, that I was doing secretary, I told him that they are already taking 5% for the party, and so they should not withhold 5%. They should not take the 5% withholding tax for government. But I think the NDC, PNDC are just metamorphosed into the NDC. And this was the DC who had instructed the accountant not to withhold the 5% because of that. And you and I know that parties demand certain amounts from contractors.
But in the courtroom, evidence is the name of the game. A while ago, I was just saying something to my friends here in the studio that there's a case I was handling, and it was a case against journalists, and the journalists had evidence of corrupt conduct. Let me call it corrupt conduct, but it was not against a public institution, and they had a whistleblower from the institution blowing the whistle to them. They had evidence of it, but the evidence was captured such that their source is seen in the evidence. So they went to court. Even though they had the evidence, they couldn't put it in the court because it would disclose their source, and their source would be in trouble. So because you can't bring it, you may lose the case. That is the situation we are talking about. It's not a general issue. That's why EOCO is saying. So they are not wrong, are they?
Well, maybe they are not wrong. That's why I said that you see these things, it gives investigation on a specific contract. They will be right. But in general, you cannot just say that there's no corruption involved in award of contract. Not just award of government contract, it's procurement in general. Procurement is a very lucrative area for corrupt officials.
Right.
And because of the lack of jobs, virtually every contractor has been compelled to pay some money to get a contract. And we've seen in cases where some contractors perceived as belonging to the operation lose their jobs are taken away from them and re-awarded to members perceived to be affiliated to the ruling government. It's not in this government alone. It has been right in the practice. And that it has been the practice for some time now.
All right. But then, hold on for me there. Thank you very much. Dr. Steve Manteau, what do you make of the EOCO report? Hello, Doc. Unmute your mic. Okay, we'll come to Dr. Steve Manteau. Yes, Dr. Kobna-Donko.
I believe it's an abuse of process. Reporting the case or the statement to EOCO itself is an abuse of process by the minister. The same minister had publicly stated that his place was full of thieves
and corrupt people.
And that when you sack them and bring new ones, meaning he has sacked some of them, brought new ones, and the new ones are worse than those he sacked. So he's living in an infested area, an area infested with thieves and corrupt people. And so when somebody comes to say that somebody from this area takes 1 million cedis before awarding a contract, then you go to report. If you were not a minister, if he had been any other person, would he have gone to EOCO? Would EOCO have taken this up? So it's an abuse of process by the minister. And for me, that is the angle I look at it. Corruption and stealing, thievery. Stealing does not even sound nice. Thievery is a matter of record. The minister said it, I didn't say it. So if in the context of that, somebody is told that this is what happens and airs that, you, the same minister, you quickly ran to EOCO, knowing very well that EOCO as a state investigation institution will be limited by evidence. In fact, if I were the direct executive secretary of EOCO, I would say, Minister, you stated it, that your place was full of chiefs. And if a place is full of chiefs, and somebody takes 1 million cedis before awarding a contract, not just chiefs and corrupt people. So it's self-evident. EOCO's limitation is that it has to go through a certain process, as the Deputy Attorney General enumerated earlier, has to go through a certain process. So the process may protect the chiefs, but the thievery exists. There's no way about that.
It's a problem with corruption, but should such statements just be allowed to go? And I say it's a problem with corruption because corruption will normally involve abuse of office for public gain. That's the general rubric we use, but it will be bribery, it could be extortion, and bribery involves two people. So one is giving, one is taking. Both are guilty of a crime. So if you go ask the giver, have you given? You expect him to say, yes, I have given. If you go ask the receiver, have you received? You expect him to say, I have received?
For me, the best example, did we question the minister when he said the place was full of chiefs and corrupt people?
He was not under investigation.
He was not under investigation. He was not under compulsion to also say that. He came out, made a voluntary confession. So why do we hold somebody else responsible if the person, on the back of his confession, states what he has said?
Yes, Penka.
I hope maybe I'll tie it to MASLOC in the end.
Yes. So we are doing this very brief, then we'll come back to MASLOC to as brief as we can before we move to the next topic.
Okay, very well. So I'll be very brief.
Yeah.
You see, Samson, you said it all, and I don't want to belabor the point. The fundamental principles of criminal jurisprudence is evidence. One of the greatest fundamental principles of criminal jurisprudence.
He who alleges.
You must prove. Especially in our case, we are not a civil law country. We are an adversarial system. You make the allegations, you prove it. The accused person does not have to prove his innocence. You have to prove the guilt of the accused person. That is why the proof in criminal trial is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. So in the circumstances of this matter, if you talk about it, you must be specific. You make general statements. If you are saying that people pay money to take contracts, you should be able to, when you appear before the panel, that on this date, somebody paid 5 million and he was given this contract. You must be specific. That is the name of the evidence, because you see, perception and speculations, however strong they are, can never secure conviction in any court. The name of the game is evidence. So when you make these wild allegations and you are pinned to give further and better particulars and evidence, you are found wanting. Even you realize that from what you read, when they asked him to state who is that person who told him, he declined. Because you remember what is going to happen if he says it. They will invite the person. And the
Apia Kubi,
yes,
in Parliament, said there was a businessman who came to bribe the MPP members who were trying to support the censure motion against the finance minister.
Yes.
When he was invited by the special prosecutor, he refused to cooperate because he wouldn't name anybody, he wouldn't do anything.
You know, sometimes I think that sometimes people look at the consequences of whatever you are coming to say, because remember that if you do any such and they invite the person, you are going to become a principal witness in all of that. And so somebody may not want to be.
But how else do we build a country, a good society?
Well, the best way to build it is to be bold, to come out and give the evidence where it is due. But as you have rightly pointed out, I mean, it is not only in Ghana. I remember when I went to the U.S., New York, and I had the opportunity of meeting very high-class justices of the district courts in New York and other places. And I also met some of the people who investigated this oil for food program and etc. during the interactions, it was very clear that they stated it, and they said that the biggest source of corruption anywhere in the world, including the US, is procurement. It was unanimous. They said that procurement is the biggest source of corruption. And Samson, you know very well how some of these things are done. That, for example, if an engineer comes up with a building plan and says that the cost of it with the profit and etc. for the contractor will amount to $1 million. Somebody sits somewhere and says, okay, we know it's $1 million, but make it 5 million. And the engineers estimate now boomerang and balloon to 5 million. And then it is awarded to a particular contractor, and later on, whatever happens, you cannot secure any conviction because all the documents will be right.
Even though value for money assessment will say that this is wrong.
Absolutely. So it means that we again have to look at our legal regime and structure and ensure that even engineers can be held accountable if it is realized that their estimates are far above what is supposed to be the normal situation. Because that is why we're not able to do those prosecutions.
In 2015, I was consultant for a group, and I reviewed the anti-corruption laws of the country, and I made a number of proposals, which I've had many repeat or even make before, that the evidential burden must shift if we want to win the fight against corruption. You earlier mentioned civil law countries.
Yes.
I only have to accuse A that A has done so and so.
And he has to prove that he didn't
I will not have to prove. A must prove
that he didn't do
by his lifestyle. There will be a wealth audit to show that you actually earn this on merit. Should we change our laws in that direction?
I wanted to just come to that. You see, when we're doing the Office of the Special Prosecutors Act, it was one of the things that we wanted to bring in, actually. We wanted to replicate a provision in the Singaporean situation. In Singapore, they have the reverse evidence system.
Right.
That if you are living a lifestyle which is not commensurate with your legitimate earned income, then you have to explain it away. Your failure to explain will amount to your guilt. Our failure to have that in our books will encourage people to continue to churn out impunity. And that is actually going to be one of the biggest challenges that we are going to have. Because you have a situation where a person's legitimately earned income at the end of the month amounts to 10,000 Ghana cedis. And maybe within a space of 2-3 years, the acquisition of properties is far, far, far ahead of that. In fact, the person's legitimately earned income times 1,000 will not even get what he's actually possession.
Yeah.
And then we watch that. And again, what are some of the problems associated with it? Something it is very clear. Such people are venerated and held high in esteem.
Yeah.
And I told you on this platform that just watch out. It sounded comic. Watch out. There are some days some individuals are celebrating their birthdays and social media goes crazy because of how they are able to do, the influence they have, the way they have been able to assist thousands. And all
I'll
that.
come to
but
the
we're not
question
looking
of
at
law.
the legitimacy.
Maybe I should end with you now on the question of law.
Yes.
Does the EOCO have the mandate on corruption as the law requires? If you read its establishment law, it clearly states the things it can investigate. It doesn't say corruption. And
But it talks about organized crime.
And then the Supreme Court,
Yes.
was it the Supreme Court, had the opportunity to pronounce on the matter and said that it doesn't have to, in the Auditor General versus EOCO, that now because we have set up OSP and giving that power to OSP, it is the OSP's job and not EOCO.
Yes, you see, it must be corruption specific. If it is corruption specific, no other entity has the mandate or jurisdiction to handle apart from the Office of Special Prosecutor, as it were, by the Act. But you see, if you look at EOCO, their mandate, it is economic and organized crime. So where there is suspicion of organized crime, they have the mandate to investigate. So for example, if you have actors, such as those who would come and then provide some money in order for another person to provide contract. You have some middlemen who make the arrangement and all that. You can situate that within the context of organized crime.
The Supreme Court said this. It has been stated that respondents' statutory functions, that's EOCO's statutory functions, initially included the investigation of offenses that involve financial or economic loss to the Republic,
Yes.
or any state entity or institution, yes, in which the state has financial interest.
Yes.
But this function was specifically taken away by the Office of Special Prosecutor Act 2017, by virtue of which statute offenses relating to suspected corruption and corruption-related offenses under the Procurement Act 2003.
Yes, as I have stated, I mean, it is not in dispute at all. That we did, because if you look at, even as we speak, some officials of state are being prosecuted under the Public Procurement Act for breaches and all that, you know. But the most important thing is, I think that they assumed jurisdiction probably because they classified it as organized crime, you know. If they classified it as organized crime, then they had the mandate to do. But strictly speaking, if it was corruption and corruption related, then they had no jurisdiction at all.
Right.
Because if you look
the
at
court
their
continued
findings,
and said, by the OSP Act, generally, corruption and corruption-related offenses under the Criminal Offences Act involving public officers must now be statutorily investigated and prosecuted by the Office of Special Prosecutor and no other institution.
yes, they are very specific. But even that one, that is where we're going to have another batch of issues, because you see, it will mean that a complete ouster of the Office of Attorney General under Article 88, which is one of the contentions that some lawyers were actually advocating, that then it will become unlawful. Because if we are making a statute to amend the Constitution, then to that extent of inconsistency, it will be a nullity. Because if
you know their law,
yes,
originally had corruption and bribery.
yes,
And that has been deleted by amendment.
that is true.
So the point now is that by that deletion and amendment, they shouldn't be doing that.
Yes, I don't have any problem. That's why I stated that if, strictly speaking, the investigation was to establish only corruption and corruption-related offenses, they would have no jurisdiction.
Okay.
But probably I'm saying they assumed jurisdiction because they were investigating organized crime, which is also within their mandate. You know, otherwise, if it's strictly on corruption, all you need to do is like what you remember the Office of Special Prosecutor late last year also made a certain determination and said that, look, this one is not within our mandate, so take it to these people.
Money laundering. So it took it to EOCO.
EOCO.
And in my conversations with the officers, I understand that this mutual thing goes on between the two of them.
Yes.
Interagency cooperation.
Cooperation,
that
of course.
they can get a case, they will investigate to a point. This is EOCO.
Yes.
They can investigate to a point and realize that this is not within our mandate.
Absolutely.
They will take it to OSP. Yes. The OSP also does the same thing with them. And they want us to pay attention to even the title of their report. Investigative findings on alleged organized crime.
I told you straight away. I said
the Ministry of Roads and Highways.
Absolutely. That is why I said that they were investigating organized. In fact, I haven't even seen it. But I said that the only reason they could assume that particular responsibility was to establish that they were investigating organized crime.
Right.
If they had said that they were investigating act of corruption at the Ministry of Roads, they would have been wrong in law.
All right.
And in fact, they would have exceeded their jurisdiction. And whatever findings they would have had would be a nullity.
All right. Thank you.
They were very careful.
Right. Thank you. Dr. Steve Manteau, let's hear you briefly on this. What do you make of the findings? Hello, Dr. Steve Manteau.
Yes, Samson.
Yes.
Really, I've listened to your panelists, and I seem to generally agree, except that, when you talk about corruption, I'm not too sure now, as we speak, whether economic crimes also, which may border on corruption, can be investigated by EOCO or not. Okay, because Honorable Kwenka seems to focus a lot more attention on organized crime in his submissions. But let us also not forget that in the name of EOCO is economic. And economic crimes may border largely on procurement-related acts of corruption. And so for me, to the extent that the law provides that clarity in terms of the boundary, I think we would respect what the two institutions do.
Does it also matter to you that in the findings themselves, paragraph 4, they refer to corruption Paragraph 4A, they refer to corruption. Paragraph 4B, they refer to corruption. Paragraph 4C, they refer to corruption. And yet, they would like you to pay attention to the heading, which talks about organized crime.
Yeah, it makes it a bit confusing because, look, depending on the issue you are investigating, it could be a crime against the state. It could be corruption related. It could be economic sabotage against the state, which I believe should fall within the mandate of EOCO. But once you go the trajectory of organized crime, then it becomes very difficult sometimes to deal with, because then it may be an individual and therefore may involve in that crime, or two people. And I'm not too sure whether you can call that organized crime. Right. Organized crime is more like a group of people who conspire to commit a crime.
Yes.
And what if two people? Would you call that organized crime? Usually corruption-related issues will involve the giver and the taker. Would that qualify as organized crime? So it becomes a bit sometimes confusing in terms of where to draw the line.
The law is an us.
Right. So what will be your brief comment also about the prosecution that was started by the man in the studio right here and now concluded about Sedina Etieno and the other gentleman at MASLOC, which has eventually ended in their incarceration, even though Sedina Etieno is not in the country. It is Daniel Axim who is around. 10 years and 5 years respectively.
Well, it's a fair deal, and I think the right signal to public office holders in terms of the management of public financial resources. I, for far too long, have these type of things gone on within the body politic of Ghana without consequences. And I think that as these prosecutions are secured time and again, and it shouldn't be against political opponents alone. I want to believe that there are similar things happening under this very government, and want to see action against the government's own appointees in a way that sends a signal that the law is no respecter of persons.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Steve Manteau. Now, you started this. You expected this end.
Long ago. Samson, this particular matter in particular, the first time I reviewed the documents personally, when the copies were made for us to have a look at it by the Attorney General and to have a conference to discuss the details, I actually cringed. I couldn't believe it. The facts were like they were concocted, to be very honest with you. The facts were like they were concocted. Because this was not just stealing, but as to borrow a word from Dog, naked thievery. You know, in one of the charges, Samson, do you know what happened? The boss of MASLOC decided to give a loan to a rural bank. And they did not even reach any agreement. Yet the money was transferred to the rural bank. When the money got to the account of the rural bank, the people then asked, okay, so what is the interest rate of the money you have sent to us? Imagine something that you should have done earlier was not even done. Then the interest rate was then quoted by Sedina. When the interest rate was quoted, the rural bank management said, look, the interest rate you have quoted, if we pick this money, we cannot make any money out of it, so we want to return it to you. What do? Good corporate practice. You write to them and give your account, MASLOC account. Then they pay the money directly into the account and produce receipt for accountability purposes. You know what she said? She directed them to cash the money and bring it to Accra. And then they cashed the money in a Ghana Must Go, carried it to Accra. They met at Bachona filling station, Total filling station, and the money was packed into her boot and she drove away. And that ended it. She's been convicted of that particular charge. Yeah.
So
then the second one.
Yes.
I'm giving you, I'm just itemizing them because I have the facts. I don't need to even read anything.
Yeah.
The second one, they were supposed to do some nationwide sensitization workshops for some category of persons with respect to matters like this. the money was about 2 million Ghana cedis. Less than 5% was used for the intended purpose. The rest was shared. As if it was ground nuts. Look, there was a fire disaster in one of the markets. Some money was allocated to help the victims. Just a little percentage of it was used. The rest, they shared it. There were some phones they had to buy. One on the market, 100 cedis. The prices they quoted, 400 each. Clearly, some vehicles were procured. In fact, those vehicles even delayed the trial because we had finished all the charges and then we bumped on a report which indicated that vehicles had been bought, some of them at thrice the market price. Some at thrice the market price. Some at twice the market price. We had to amend our charges to include all these. And remember that they were found guilty of over 70 charges. All of them.
78.
Yes. In fact, it is one of the most nauseating cases I have come across in legal prosecution. Because the act of impunity, naked thievery and robbery perpetuated by them was frightening. And you see, when the judgment was read, I posted something on my social media handle. I indicated that it was not a moment for anybody to celebrate. It was not a moment for anybody to be joyous, but for us all to have a sober reflection.
In fact, Tua Yeboah
Yes.
has been saying,
Yes.
all those in office now,
Yes.
take a cue.
That's what I'm just coming to say. You see, you have to be very, very careful. Day of accountability will come. And when it comes, you will be in that dock alone. And the wheels of justice may grind slowly, but in the end, when the pronouncement is made and you are taken away to Insawam, you would come to the realization that acts of impunity cannot go unpunished and go forever. Something, just to conclude on this, if you look at the acts, and if you look at the conduct of even the principal person, which even made Justice Sefia Sewa very angry. I mean, that the state didn't take enough steps or action to be able to have her in Ghana to face trial. Because clearly whatever she did it in order to evade conviction. That was why they had to try her in absentia in line with the constitutional principle and dictate. But I'm saying this again, that those in office now ought to take a clue from this. And this is the third time, and all those cases passed through my hand anyway, as Deputy Attorney General in charge of criminal prosecution. This is the third case of a very nauseating nature. The first one was NCA. At a point in time, some money was shared like groundnuts, and they secured conviction. Then this one. And the third one, you remember, venture capital. You remember venture capital? In that particular case, they had to take advantage of Section 35 of the Courts Act. And then they did a plea bargain. They were convicted, and then they went ahead to pay. If you look at a combination of these cases and the convictions that have been secured, and then at least the amounts of money involved and etc., a lot would have been saved to this nation. But as I have stated time and again, those in office now ought to take a clue from this. And I thank my brother Tua Yeboah for the statement he has made. They have to take a cue. Because it is very, very, very juicy.
Initially, the court,
dip your hand in there and fetch.
Initially, the court, there were people who were very critical about the court, that it was not being sympathetic, she was not well, she needed bail to be able, she needed opportunity to travel, take care of herself. And this was like a media trial. And eventually the court had to succumb and say, well, go and take care of yourself and come. And she goes, she doesn't come.
She doesn't come.
The question Ghanaians are asking now is this judgment as empty as the paper?
Well, something, remember that even at the initial stages, I thought that there was going to be another step that would have been taken, an international collaboration to get her brought back for face justice.
We're told
but if you try that, you know, most of the countries up there, they will think there is political persecution, and so they will not allow it. They will even extradite the person. But now that we have secured conviction, the person is a convict,
right? And
you have to come and serve your sentence. So what they now need to do is to collaborate with the U.S. authorities and the anti-corruption agencies there to ensure that the person is extradited to come and serve the terms. But something, I said this in London, and I want to say it today. Sometimes out there, when we go, We are so much bastard. We went for economic crimes conference in Jesus College in the UK.
Be very brief about that.
And it was some kind of unanimous thing by our friends from the West that we are just a group of criminals up here. And I stood up there and I made a very forceful point. And I talked about the fact that sometimes millions of dollars from Africa, we cut it to those countries. They receive the money. They know very well that we are incapable of getting such monies. They receive it there and later on freeze those accounts and make it their own property. Perhaps some of them are more criminal even than those that are accusing them.
Right.
So I am just in conclusion saying that what the fate of Sedina Tamaklo and other persons be a guide to all public office holders that one day accountability will knock on your door.
Right. Thank you very much. I was trying, and thanks to Martin Pebu, Alex Mould is not in jail. He would have been in jail.
Yes, but for Martin Pebu,
he's too surety,
yes.
And then she escaped.
Probably there was some advice. She said, okay, if I go now, the consequences that the civil process will be taken.
Thanks to the case that Martin Pebu mounted, that a person who stands surety should not be put in prison, but rather their property should be chased to liquidate the bail sum. I was trying to put the monies together, and I went to each count. Count one, stealing. That is the 28th of August, 2014, 500,000. She stole the money. Count two, stealing. 13th April, 2016, 84,000. She stole it. Count three, stealing. 21st of April, 2016, 73,500. Count four, stealing. 1st June, 2016, 126,000. Count five, conspiracy to steal, stealing. 16th June, 2016, 114,000. Count six, stealing. 16th June, 2016, 114,000. And some of the amount, huge, 228,000, 158,000, 162,000, 136,000. I want to give you an idea how the court came by the eventual total amount. They were not conjured from the skies. They are monies that were in fact stolen. 3.19 million while they were at MASLOC, and then they caused a loss of 1.97 million financial loss. They also made an authorized commitment resulting in financial obligations to the government to the tune of 61.47 million. Vitus Azim. Hello, Vitus Azim.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. So we have come to the end of the prosecution, but getting the money is going to be another issue. What do you say from your end?
Well, for me, I think that when you are accused of or found guilty of causing financial loss to the state, the first thing should be the recovery of the money. As for sending the person to jail, it should be a second factor. That is penalizing the person for the crime. But the state should be interested in getting the money back, either in cash or in properties that the fellow has acquired over the years. Otherwise, we'll just waste our time, send the person to jail, the state will take care of the person in jail, then he or she will release, come out and go and enjoy the booty. So for me, the priority should be recovering the money, retrieving the money that have been illegally taken. And then, of course, the fellow has committed a crime by illegally taking the money. You can now go ahead to jail the person. If you don't do that, I think we are not making a headway. Of course, let's say that it's a good thing that this thing has happened. It should deter others from getting involved in that type of thing. But some people bail the lady. They should be called book. Otherwise, the lady can just get lost in the U.S. and we cannot get her back. And then after 2 weeks of discussion, we forget about it. So the people who stood for the bail must also be brought up. And the investigation should go beyond those two people. One of your panelists talked about a bank carrying the money in Ghana must go and bring it to Accra and put in a private car. That is something that those people involved should be held to account for. You cannot do that with public money.
Right.
So it's good that they have done the same, but
and
they need to go beyond what they have done.
What do you think can be done to those that they were making purchases from and the prices were inflated 2 times, 3 times the cost of the product on the market.
Conspiracy, clearly.
Well,
Because that's what enables the crime to continue, the stealing to continue. They inflate the price, but they don't actually purchase at that price. The one who is taking the money will subsequently give the other part of the money to the person in office who is stealing it through that kind of a conduit.
yes, that's why I say that the investigation should go beyond just these two personalities. There are people who collaborated. There are people who connived. There are people who condone in this whole exercise, and they should be called to book. I have always said that if electricity company or what the company complains about the stolen meters, somebody needs to go after this dealers in this second-hand things. Those who buy them from the thieves. If you tackle it from there, they will no longer be stealing them because there is no market for those things.
All right.
So all the people that are involved in these things should also be brought to book.
Right. Dr. Steve Mantia, are you there?
Pardon?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. The situation where we end up with these prosecutions only after the people have left office, do you think that is deterrent enough? Because unless we play the ostrich, we know that these things continue. They are happening right now in these offices. People are going to constituencies using public funds, sharing them in a certain way just to win votes. And they may probably say they are going to give support for some people in excess of $1 million and only end up there giving 500,000 of the money and pocket the rest. This is going on.
Yeah, that's why I indicated earlier that it is good we have this conviction. Next step will be how we execute it. But it is more important that we have these type of prosecutions under the certain government. When governments in power begin to tackle corruption within their own government, then we'll be sending the right signal to the perpetrators of these kind of acts, which undermine our economic development. So yes, it's good, but then we should begin to look within. We hear of cases during parliamentary primaries and money is being shared left, right, center. You would want a certain government to begin to call people to order, to begin to question, get investigations instituted into how these monies were secured, and then begin to prosecute where we are able to establish through investigations that they were not properly secured. Now, my biggest worry now is even the amounts that are getting into delegate vote buying and the role of even illegal mining in this. So the web of criminal financing of political campaigning is becoming much broader than we envisage currently. And we need to get certain governments to begin to act and deal with their own appointees.
Thank you very much. What will you say briefly to conclude this?
Well, as a member of a party born out of probity, accountability, probity and accountability, I find it very difficult to say anything about a conviction as long as the processes, all the legal processes were kosher. If all the processes were kosher and she's been convicted for what she did in office, no NDC person will ordinarily say, please, you are wrong. But the difficulty we have is that we have the Auditor General's report, the COVID, for example. Auditor General makes definitive findings.
Year in, year out.
And people culpable have not been prosecuted, let alone convicted. And that is the biggest challenge we have.
All right.
And these are live cases. The Auditor General comes out, reports to Parliament, Public Accounts Committee, and the government seems not interested. They are more interested in clearing current government officials. And so when you go back 8-10 years and picks a case, as legitimate, as genuine as the case may be, It is looked at from a certain prism.
That's right.
And that is the challenge we have to look at.
Occupy Ghana took Auditor General reports for only 5 years, and monies that have been stolen and not accounted for was almost 3 times what we have gone to the IMF for. Tell me we are a serious country. The judge said the sentence against the accused persons also takes cognizance of the quantum of funds lost, the deliberation and enterprise with which the offenses were committed. Deliberation and enterprise. The offenses were committed. And the fact that this type of white-collar crime is in the experience of this court, one too many. The court will therefore, to curtail crimes of this nature, hand down a deterrent sentence to deter would-be professional criminals from copying the actions of the accused. And the court ended by saying, quote, the prosecution is directed to undertake forfeiture proceedings against the assets of the accused, particularly Sedina, who received substantially all the money lost to the state. And this is where we draw the curtains on this subject matter. We'll be right back to ask if Alan is mobilizing such a big alliance to make a dent in the NPP and NDC votes to become president, and other former independent presidential candidates also coming. What will it do to the political landscape in December 2024? We'll be right back.